Should you believe everything Apple tells you about the iPhone 15 Pro? When you look to buy an iPhone 15 Pro, everyone tells you about the big stuff, the camera and the optical zoom, the action button, the new lightweight titanium material, also several flaws and problems that Apple won't tell you. I've combined my experience along with meticulously analyzing several 3-month reviews of the iPhone 15 Pro online and found that there are 4 big problems you need to know about. So let's get into it. First, the durability and the design. The new titanium was supposed to be the chosen one, being stronger and lighter and generally more durable, and it is, but with compromises. On the plus side, it's definitely lighter, it looks very premium, it doesn't scratch very easily, and the weight reduction is nice, but a 20-gram reduction in my pocket doesn't make a big difference day to day. It's noticeable when you first pick it up, but not so much afterwards. The rounded edges make it better to hold in your hands for sure, but it's not as durable as they claimed. First, it fingerprints really easily, especially on the blue color, which is sad because I personally love that color and somehow Apple just can't get blue right. We have the same problem on the slick looking blue MacBook that no one can buy as well. Luckily, the iPhone 15 Pro doesn't bend or break that easily, even though there is this video on the internet going viral which shows it breaking super easily. Ouch! That hurt even to watch. But I did the research on this and it's a one-off incident.
And there is absolutely nothing.
It doesn't seem to break easily at all, so we're all good on that. But unfortunately, it does chip and get nicked on the edges. It does seem to scratch a bit more easily than the earlier versions as well, which I checked across multiple 90-day reviewers and everyone seems to agree on this. And some are even surprised on where the scratches have come from since they've been extra careful with their phone. There are also many recent reports of the edges peeling, and these reports are new, so we need time to verify if this is a genuine issue, but there are large Reddit threads on this and several news reports which seem to point to a manufacturing adhesive defect. There have also been several users who claim that the back of the iPhone has sharp edges that almost hurt because of the separation between the glass back and the titanium frame, and many reviewers on YouTube have also had the same experience. To be honest, I couldn't feel it on the one that I checked, but that could be a good batch maybe. I want to point out not to take this one too seriously just yet. These things can go a bit viral from time to time and can be more a one batch problem than an iPhone 15 Pro wide problem. But all in all, I think we can safely say that the iPhone 15 Pro isn't necessarily all that more durable, especially to justify the price difference that is as large as $300, pounds or euros, or 70,000 rupees for the Pro Maxes. Man, that's a lot. You can get a pair of AirPod Pros or an Apple Watch for that much. But if you're aiming to buy an iPhone 15 Pro anyway, I have one recommendation. But before I tell you, I have a small aim of my own to get to 5,000 subscribers by the spring, and I've been working very hard late at night to make these videos, which I hope you're liking and finding useful. And if yes, a like for the video and subscribing to my channel would be so appreciated. Back to the recommendation to avoid the nicks and fingerprinting. It's simple. Try to avoid the darker colors like the blues which have more of this fingerprinting and nicking issue, and go for the lighter colors like the natural or white titanium. Okay, second, and this might spark some emotions, but that action button which they talked about, it's a bit of a letdown. It isn't as useful as we thought, and it's surprisingly a bit hard to use. The action button is one of the signature features on the iPhone 15 Pro this year. Apple spent several minutes focusing on this. It forms a big part of their marketing and advertising, and at first glance it seems great. Instead of a button that's being used just to mute the ringer like we've had for years, it can now be customized to do what's most useful for you from a long list of things like voice memos, a torch, translation, a camera, and you can map it to basically anything you want, and you can still keep it as a mute switch if that's what you want. Seems like a win all the way, right? Not quite. The issue with this has been not functionality, but usability. The placement of this button is kind of awkward, especially when using it with one hand. The location above the volume buttons was fine for the mute switch, which we didn't use very often, but hard to reach for a button that we want to use a lot. With the action button there, you suddenly realize that it's probably easier to hard press on the camera or the flashlight button that are on the lock screen, or just unlock and click the actual app rather than try to awkwardly find a way to press this button, which is actually sad because there are actually quite a few good use cases to configure the action button. like making it open Google Assistant instead of having to use Siri, because, and I'm sure you'll agree, it's been 10 years and Siri just doesn't seem to get any better. You can also link the action button to starting a new voice conversation with ChatGPT, which is again very useful. And honestly, we already have an action button. It's called the button on the back of the iPhone, the back tap on the Apple sign, which can also be configured to most of these features. It's easier to use and it exists not just on the iPhone 15 Pro, but on older iPhones as well. I'm curious to know your experience with the action button. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Third, USB-C, which funnily enough was the big headlining feature of this year's iPhone, and no surprise because they really had to search for things to add to the bento box image this year. For example, if you zoom into this, ceramic shield, next level mobile gaming, dynamic island, Apple. We know that these are last year's features, you're just casually calling this year's, right? But back to USB-C. It's anyway something that they were forced to do when the EU ruled that they have to, which is a bit sad since every other smartphone maker was already on USB-C, and Apple holding on to Lightning was very inconvenient for users and also massively bad for the environment. The EU estimated this at 11,000 metric tons of e-waste every year because of the Lightning cable. Wow! Now, whilst moving to USB-C is undoubtedly good for the industry and the environment, and of course more convenient and nice to have, I'd argue that it's not that big of a deal for users yet. And that's because of three reasons. One, whilst the iPhone has moved to USB-C, you probably have a couple of devices like your old AirPods or the AirPods Max or the iPad or something which use the Lightning cable. So it'll probably be another year or two before you can truly stop carrying it around. Second, we don't tend to use wired charging that much anymore. Many of you will have wireless chargers, and with Apple finally giving in and not restricting fast charging to only its MagSafe chargers and supporting fast charging on the new global Qi 2 industry standard, which is the wireless charger you see everywhere, we will use wired cables even lesser. I'm going to put a stake in the ground and say that Apple will probably remove the charging port entirely in the next 2 to 3 years. And finally, whilst Apple loves to market high-speed data transfers on their new USB-C, let's be honest, when was the last time you transferred data using the cable on the iPhone? Most people just use AirDrop or Cloud Platform. The only people using physical cables are pro photographers transferring their very large ProRes files, which is a very, very, very small set of people who actually use the iPhone. So yes, USB-C isn't that useful for the average user. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a great thing. But it's not that feature that's worth paying $300 for. Fourth is the processor. Whilst again on paper the iPhone 15 Pro has the A17 Pro chip with 6 cores, and the regular 15 has the A16 Bionic with 5 cores, this is just another way for Apple to create a difference and get you to pay more. But take my word for it, both phones are super fast and zippy. Even Apple agrees. Behind all their marketing hoopla, they tell us that it's only a 10% performance improvement. But of course, in the Pro, the 3nm architecture and the 30 FPS ray tracing in games is so cool for all those people that are playing heavy duty games like Assassin's Creed on their iPhone. Wait, that's almost no one. Let me put it differently. When was the last time your iPhone felt slow? Unless you have an iPhone 8 or 9 or something, they're all fast. The bottom line is the processor is now so fast it's become a marketing gimmick for most people who do the same everyday tasks like mail and camera and apps and social media. Only if you play a really hectic game like Resident Evil 4 or Assassin's Creed on the highest graphics setting will the processor difference start to show up, given it's a 20% faster GPU on the Pro. A more useful feature of a processor would have actually been better battery life, like they did on the Apple Watch Ultra, which I love and I recommend strongly because that's worth paying for. This speed improvement is like driving a Hyundai with a Ferrari engine in the middle of central London. What are you going to do with it? So does this mean you shouldn't buy the iPhone 15 Pro? I don't think it's that simple. It all depends on the perspective you take. If money is no object and you want the best iPhone, this is it. It's got a premium feel, smaller bezels that make it look like one giant screen, a great camera with 5x optical zoom, and so much more. But even if you have the money, the question to ask is whether or not it's worth it over other iPhones. Should you be spending the extra $300, pounds or euros, or 70,000 rupees for example to get the Pro Max? Or should you get the regular 15 and buy yourself AirPods or a new Apple Watch and still have money left over? When you take that perspective, I would say the fact that the titanium doesn't make it much more durable, the action button isn't really great and worth paying for, the camera is only marginally better, as I talk about in detail in my other video. All of this makes a compelling case to say, just save the money and get some amazing AirPods instead.